Hello there, my name is Overy and welcome to the first episode of my History Corner. This is a new format of history video which we're going to be going ahead with in the coming weeks. And our first subject for this week is the Battle of Britain, the clash between the British Royal Air Force and the German Luftwaffe that took place between July and October 1940. The battle was an attempt by the Germans to force the British to make peace by pursuing air superiority over southern England as a precursor to a potential invasion. It began as a series of raids on merchant shipping and intensified into large-scale attacks on British airfields, radar stations, ports, industry and infrastructure. At its peak, the Luftwaffe threw hundreds of aircraft at a time against a numerically inferior fighter command, but to no avail. Despite inflicting heavy losses, they were unable to secure anything close to air superiority and paid a heavy price of its own for trying. Over the course of the battle, the Luftwaffe lost almost 1,900 aircraft, 2,500 aircrew, and failed utterly in significantly impairing Fighter Command's ability to defend its airspace. Seeing that victory in the air was proving to be beyond the Luftwaffe's ability, in September Hitler postponed the invasion of Britain indefinitely, cementing a decisive victory for Fighter Command. To the British, victory in the battle was the triumph of an outnumbered force of plucky fighter pilots, defeating the might of the Luftwaffe against the odds and saving Britain from invasion by Nazi Germany. In the years since the war, this view of the RAF as plucky underdogs who fought against the odds has only been intensified.
The German military machine, a formidable enemy of thousands of planes, a sure weapon of mass destruction against a small and undermanned force.
At least in the UK. The RAF pilots, and by extension the nation itself, have come to be typified as the few, standing up to an aggressive European power in a narrative which neatly fits into Britain's historic self-image and the perception of its role in the Second World War. As I'm going to argue in this video, this perception is not entirely accurate. The battle was far from the perilous threat to Britain's existence that we might have come to know it as. It's easy to see why this plucky image of the Battle of Britain has developed, as the view of Britain and its RAF as the inferior force was held by British policymakers at the time, and for good reason. Estimates of Luftwaffe strength produced by the air industry in July 1940 painted a grim picture, approximating the size of their opponents at over 12,000 aircraft, of which almost 6,000 were ready for immediate operations. These frontline aircraft were estimated to include over 2,500 bombers and over 1,500 fighters. This armada dwarfed what the RAF was able to field at the same time, which was only 900 fighters and 560 bombers. In addition to this, the British estimated that the Germans were producing approximately 1,000 combat aircraft a month, which would give the Luftwaffe greater capacity to replace its losses than that held by the RAF, who averaged a little over 450 fighters produced each month between July and December 1940. The sense of facing such an overwhelming force of aircraft undoubtedly contributed to the sense of peril that the British felt, summed up by Winston Churchill's comments on the 20th of August that never had so much been owed by so many to so few. To the British people, the RAF was David to the Luftwaffe's Goliath. The reality, however, is that the British needn't have worried. The Air Ministry overestimated the strength of the Luftwaffe by a factor of 2 to 1. The force faced by the British was in actual fact just 988 bombers and 1,171 fighters. In the production of aircraft too, the British dramatically overestimated. The 1940 average of German fighter and bomber production was just 400 a month, less than half the initial estimates and lower than what the RAF were achieving. So, though the Luftwaffe was indeed more numerous than the RAF, the two air forces were much closer in size than was first thought, and the Germans could not replace aircraft losses as quickly as the British could. Further to this, the British had two more key advantages which more than evened the odds. First, the British possessed substantial technological advantages over the Germans, with a sophisticated network of radar stations spread along the southern English coast. Home Chain could provide vital early warning of approaching hostile formations up to 100 miles away, giving British squadrons time to get airborne and intercept incoming attacks before they reached their targets. Though the Germans were undoubtedly able to land heavy blows on the RAF, when they did, such as the large attacks on airfields like Biggin Hill, the losses were absorbed by the RAF, damaged runways repaired, and Britain's ability to defend its airspace undiminished. And so, German attempts in August to strike a decisive blow against the RAF with its Eagle attack failed, and the Battle of Britain can be best characterised as one primarily of attrition, one which the RAF was winning right from the start. Between July 10th and July 31st, the Luftwaffe downed 91 RAF aircraft with a loss of 185 of its own, a ratio of virtually 2-1. In pilot losses too, the Luftwaffe lost close to twice as many men as the RAF. The proximity of battles to home turf allowed the British to recover downed pilots and bring them back into action, whereas virtually all crews of downed Luftwaffe aircraft were lost to the German war effort. As an example, on the 13th of August, the start of the main German attacks on Fighter Command, the Germans lost 47 aircraft along with all of their crews. British lost just 13 fighters, with 7 of those pilots saved. This pattern continued throughout the battle, with German casualties consistently higher than that sustained by their opponents. Despite this, faulty German estimates of British casualties led the Germans to believe they were shooting down 3 times as many British planes as in reality, which meant the Germans believed the RAF to be crippled by the end of August and turned their attention to London. On the 7th of September, the Germans bombed London for the first time, with the first wave totaling almost 1,000 aircraft. Though the RAF was supposedly all but defeated, this force was nonetheless met by no fewer than 23 squadrons of RAF fighters, who downed 40 German aircraft with a loss of 28 of their own. On the 15th of September, the Germans again attempted a large set-piece attack, but suffered approximately 60 losses, twice that of the RAF. So, far from leaving the RAF on its last legs, the German assault on Fighter Command hadn't even dented its strength. On July the 1st, the RAF was able to field 640 fighters, and on September the 1st it fielded 648, an increase of deployed fighters. The Germans may well have had the larger air force in total, but it expended hundreds of aircraft for no discernible gain, and air superiority was no closer to being achieved in September than it had been in July. For the Germans, the Battle of Britain can only be interpreted as a resounding defeat that was never even close to success. So what of Operation Sea Lion, the German plans to invade Britain? The operation was shelved with the Luftwaffe's failure to win air superiority, but was it even feasible in the first place? The truth is it probably wasn't. Even if the Germans had gained total air superiority over England, the challenges in landing the approximately 120,000 troops the plan called for would have been immense. These troops, along with all of their equipment, supplies and vehicles, would have had to have been moved across an English channel still controlled by a powerful Royal Navy. The balance of naval forces hadn't been good for Germany in 1939 and was only made worse with the losses that the Kriegsmarine suffered during the invasion of Norway in April 1940. Furthermore, the Germans lacked appropriate ships to keep an invasion force supplied or the invasion barges to get them ashore in the first place. Even with air superiority, there can only have been a very slim chance of success, and Sea Lion was an impossibility without it. These facts were not lost on all those in the British government. Some even actively hoped for a German invasion attempt, expecting they would be easily thrown back into the sea. Operation Sea Lion was a non-starter, and it's arguably only the overestimation of German Luftwaffe strength that led many to believe it feasible. In summary, the Battle of Britain shows us two things. Firstly, that the German Luftwaffe was not nearly as powerful as was believed, and secondly, more fundamentally, that air power was simply not capable of the kind of effective strategic bombing that its proponents advocated at this stage in the war. Neither the RAF nor the Luftwaffe had the numbers to mount an effective bombing campaign in the manner that the Allies would unleash on Germany later in the war. As Phillips Payson O'Brien puts it, no one had the machines capable of delivering the necessary accuracy or weight of attack needed to seriously damage the productive capacity of another country. No one possessed a fighter aircraft with the range to protect the existing bombers deep into another country and return, and crucially, both the Germans and the British possessed enough modern fighters to make any incursion of unescorted bombers far too damaging to continue. And so, with a resounding German defeat in the Battle of Britain, the survival of the British army at Dunkirk was cemented and Germany's eventual defeat made possible. I've been Overy, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.